Hello, and welcome to this latest Beer and Natter session. Now, if you've not seen one of these before, I will warn you that there are some adult themes, certainly some adult language, and me consuming alcohol while talking. Are we 30 seconds in yet? No. While talking nonsense. So, you know, if you are offended by profanity, then you probably shouldn't be watching this channel in the first place, because I do swear. I'm not particularly foul-mouthed, but when I'm on my own, I swear. But also, if you don't want to hear my views, stop now. Don't unsubscribe, because there's plenty of content that isn't like this. I just do these, and they've become very popular, and people get all excited. The noise in the background, by the way, is my little radiator, and I'll give you a walk around in a second. We're 30 seconds in. Beer and Bollocks. If I utter profanity in the first 30 seconds, you see, it makes the video not suitable for advertisers. And if I don't, but do utter profanity after 30 seconds, then it's okay with subscribers and, with advertisers. So there you go. Right, so I'm in my shed. It is the end of January. Well, what date are we? It says it's 5:30, and it's the 30th of January. There you go. So by the time I publish this, it'll be February. So all of you kind of like, you know, folk, good folk, kind folk who have given up booze during January, I've just why set yourself up for defeat, Richard? Then I've decided to, publish this. You can have a beer with me. So this shed is in my garden at home, registered address of Church House, Sussex, me. This is one light not working over there. I've got to change the tube. This is centre of operations. This is kind of where it all started. This is my bench and my oven for powder coating. This is it. And there's my little radiator there, which is going to take a little bit of a nip off the air in here. Because I'll tell you what, it's a bit chilly. So, we can't have a beer and bollocks session without beer. So, what have we got here? We've got 3 offerings that have been bought for me. I've got a Wainwright golden beer. Refreshingly rewarding crafted golden beer, award-winning. There you go. It doesn't say which brewery it is. Wainwrightgoldenbeer.co.uk. There you go. One. We've got Abbott, because you can never have beer and bollocks without Abbott. You've got to have Abbott. It's one of my. I do like. It's nice. And then the last one, I saw this. And I thought, Old Empire IPA, that's got to be worth a go. Then I saw 5.7. Thought, that's definitely worth a go. And that's a Marston's brew. So which one should we start with? Let's start with Wainwright, because honestly, I've never had this before. And then we can get in. I'm going to use a chainsaw spanner to get the lid open. There we are. Anything can open a big bottle of beer. Absolutely anything. And then we'll try and keep this to half an hour, Richard, shall we? Right, okie dokie. Now, as promised, some of you good folk, have been sending me questions. And I shall try my best to answer some of those questions. First of all, cheers. I'll turn this around so you can see the label. There we are. Cheers and jolly good health. Let's hope February is better than January. That's not bad, actually. It's probably a bit cold. Pardon me. So what does it say on it? A superb, thirst-quenching, refreshing beer packed full of flavour, lightly hopped, absolutely, with subtle sweet notes. I'm picking that up, and a delicate citrus aroma. I'm also picking that up. Inspired by the author, Alfred Wainwright, famous for his Lakeland Falls guidebook. Lakeland Fell, guidebook. My glasses are on wonky, I think. For every summit, Wainwright conquered through his passion, the commitment, each one delivered the ultimate reward. Refreshingly rewarding for those who think they've earned it. What a load of old bollocks. Nice beer, though. Right, okay, so some of you good folk have been sending me questions. So let me rattle through some of the questions, first of all. Some of these go back a while, because I've not done a beer and bollocks session in a while. Pardon me, that is quite gassy. I'll give it that. It's probably the citrus element of it. Right. Less ums. So Scuff said, I've thoroughly enjoyed watching the series and I've learned a lot about Zenith carbs and the Rover V8 in the process. Would you consider some sort of will it start type videos with other engines? Well, yeah, I would. Fitting them into kind of my daily kind of routine is a bit tricky. I've got a Will It Start 200 TDI coming up with that series about the series. And I've got a Peugeot 4-cylinder diesel down in the green A suffix Range Rover in Devon. Definitely going to give that a go. But other than that, I kind of need a car, really. So I need the engine in order to do the Will It Start video. My Stag hasn't been started in 14 months. Yeah, I know. It's like the cobbler's boots. You know, when you're fixing everyone else's cars, you never get a chance to look at your own. And I have not had a chance to look at my own Stag in 14 months. It's a crime. So, yes, I would consider Will It Start type videos. They're always fun. It's only a machine after all. Perhaps we can do some Will It Start on, I want a 2-stroke lawnmower. I really want to kind of like, you know, let's get a 2-stroke lawnmower. That'll be a laugh. Yeah, we can get, I'll keep it in mind. But like I say, if it's going to be an engine that's in a car, I kind of need the car, really, first of all. Luton Box Life. Fantastic series. You've done a first-class job, as always, and I think this is referring to Project Bob. And yes, thank you very much. I really do. I appreciate the, people telling me this, because, you know, there's never any doubt in my mind. And as you know, I put an awful lot of attention to detail, but I don't go kind of the whole 9 yards that some of the restorers do, where every single thing is recoated or every single thing is rejuvenated to make it look brand spanking new. I want the car to be restored and solid and reliable, but I don't necessarily want every single thing to be new in it. So I do appreciate that, thank you. Dale, hello Dale, has said, have you genuinely enjoyed doing Bob? Yeah. Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. I wouldn't do this shit if I didn't enjoy it. I really wouldn't. Working on my own in a freezing cold workshop. No, it's not all about that. I have enjoyed doing Bob. Some of the tasks on that car were quite tricky and challenged me. But there was enough on that project that I could take a step away from those jobs and just do something else, really. See if I can get any more burps out of this bottle. Probably help if I drank slower. Right. Oh, another question from Dale. Following on, I'm fairly certain that there were some aspects of Bob that were a right pain in the arse. Incompatible parts, etc. Yes. If you haven't seen the Bob series, I probably need to sum up the Bob series in a single kind of episode. It was quite extensive. Bob was a bobtailed Range Rover. And because it was A suffix and because it was a J plate A suffix, 1971, June 1971 car, and because of the COVIDs and because I was locked down in Devon, I thought, you know what, let's turn this back into a Range Rover again. Prior to the COVIDs, my plan was kind of, let's turn it back into a proper 2-door bobtail, rather than the absolute and utter cack-handed arse about face bloody, modifications that had occurred on it, because probably it was just designed to last X number of months on a beach. And there's no point in building a proper competition bobtail if you're just going to fuck it up on the beach. So that was the first plan, was really to restore Bob as a bobtail, but do it around a proper body shell rather than a load of Engerline. The biggest problems with Bob, and it caused some serious head scratching, were the chassis alignment, to ensure that chassis was aligned. When I was looking through the manuals, it was stupid things in the manual like, plus or minus 2 mil. And then when you looked at the alignment plates, it's kind of like 7/8 of the way through the process. Look at the alignment plate. It's like plus or minus 2 inches. So, yeah, the chassis alignment caused me a lot of head scratching, but you could see in the series how I logically worked through that. The biggest pain in the arse with Bob was getting the right gearbox mounts for that ZF, sorry ZF, what are you talking about, Richard? You're talking bollocks now. For that LT77 Borg Warner 5-speed gearbox that came out of a VM engine Range Rover, came from Tim Hammond, and I swapped it for a set of carbs, Yeah, because that gearbox came from another engined car. I hadn't fully considered the impact of the gearbox mounts. And then, of course, because the gearbox mounts weren't right, the tail of the gearbox was too low, the exhaust wouldn't fit. It was a fucking ball's ache. Other than that, that was the only real downer on that entire project. And that's something that I sort of left because it was just irritating me, and I couldn't work out what the solution was. I thought it was the exhaust, and then, of course, I realised, actually, maybe not the exhaust. Famous 4 were very good at responding. Double S, who I got the exhaust from via Famous 4, were less so. But the exhaust is very good, and it fit beautifully once I got the right gearbox mounts on. But yeah, that gearbox mounts. If you're going to put a VM engined gearbox into your Range Rover and you want to run it on a V8, then you'll need a bell housing, and you will also need, the gearing's different, but not that different, but it's going to affect it, but also you'll need the right mounts for it. And that was a struggle, and even the bloody parts manual couldn't help me there. Pain in the fucking arse. I think that explains that one for you. Thanks, Dale, good question. Right, David Brody has asked me, do you think car enthusiasts are as aware as they should be of what the impact could be of the government's push towards removal of fossil fuel cars from the road and the impact this will have on us all? That's a really good question. It's one that's at the forefront of all our minds at the moment. And from my personal perspective, I think I don't understand it. I really don't. I don't understand scrappage schemes. I don't understand the government's push, the government's drive for, keeping white goods going as long as they possibly can. But then the second most expensive purchase that you will ever make, third most expensive purchase you'll ever make in your life after marriage and a house, because let's face it, marriage costs you way more than a house, could cost you way more than a house, is a car. And what the government basically wants you to do is to scrap your car as quickly as you possibly can and buy another one. From Germany or from France, if you really must. Or nothing wrong with French cars. There really isn't. The trouble is everything's a Euro pox these days, isn't it? So I think the government's push to removing fossil fuel cars from the road is a knee-jerk reaction to climate change. And I'm not going to go down this fucking climate change route. And that wasn't meant to be a fucking fuck thing. That was just, I'm not going to go down the climate change argument. I'm just fed up, sick to the back teeth of talking to people about climate change. Yeah, the fucking climate changes. Otherwise we were in an ice age. The volcano that went off in the bloody Philippines the other day has caused more damage to the environment than China did in a week. And whatever changes... Anyway, we're going on to a rant there, Richard. So we're going to stop that. But the government's current initiative is ULEZ, ultra-low emission zones, in cities, which I find a bit odd because you can just pay some money and carry on polluting the air in cities. Most people are forced to do that. So what is it other than a money-making scheme? I don't know. And then the other thing is the electric vehicles, the EVs. So the government wants everyone to have an EV. No, they don't. They don't. They want enough people to have an EV that the government can show that they're making an impact to the world body, whatever it is, against the climate changing. And if everyone was to have an EV right now, then I think the national grid would be crippled. The national grid, as in the electricity supply. Because I think everyone would get home from work between, let's say, 5:30 and 7:30 and plug their EV in. And do you think the national grid can cope with that? No, it'd be rolling blackouts. It's a farce. So I think car enthusiasts are aware of what's going on. I'll come back to the question, David, if you don't mind, because I want to actually, after I've gone through the questions, I actually want to now. You've hit the spot. You actually have hit the spot. I think I'm going to dedicate this Beer and Ballcocks session to how green is a new car compared to an old car. It's a good question, David. See, you've got me rattled already. I'm half a bottle of beer in. Fifth question, I'm rattled. It's not going to turn into a rant, though, I promise. I'm far too cheerful for that. If I put it in the glass, I'll be able to drink it slower. Right, Philip Strodds, who's I've been helping Philip with his Range Rover. So when it comes to Range Rover Classic, do you think galvanising is best or powder coating will be okay? Okay, there's a number of questions here. So I'll answer the first one first. So when it comes to the Range Rover Classic, do you think that galvanising is best or powder coating will be okay? Galvanising, if it's hot dip galvanised, then I think that's probably the best mechanism. However, getting it painted after it's been galvanised is a tricky process. So you need to neutralise the surface, then you need to put a primer on that makes the surface sticky, then you need to put a chassis paint over the top, or you can just leave it bare. It needs to be properly galvanised, though. And one of the problems with the hot dip galvanising is that there is a risk that the chassis will warp. So it needs to be done by someone who knows what they're doing, and they're going to realign the chassis with a press or with, a 10-pound hammer or whatever. As far as powder coating a chassis, now I know I did a powder coated chassis, and I did that with Alan, the first Range Rover I did. And one of the problems I had with that, although the powder coating was done very properly, not like TWR did it on their space frame cars, where they tried to powder coat straight onto a rusty frame, I guess, which is why they all rotted out inside the powder coating. The problem with powder coating a chassis is that, first and foremost, the powder coat is microns thick, so any defects or any anomalies in the surface of the chassis are going to show through the powder coating, and that's one of the lessons I learned. The second lesson I learned, really, is that every single time you go near the chassis, there's a risk that you're going to chip the powder coat. And what do? You swear. Darn it all. It did give a really clean and easy to manage surface. I don't think, though, that powder coating the chassis is enough to save it. So I still think you probably need to put a clear wax over the top of a powder coat. And certainly you'd need to inject wax into the inside of the chassis, because most of the time, certainly in Land Rover series, the chassis rot from the inside to the outside. So, yeah, would I galvanise or would I powder coat? Well, I do neither, actually. Nowadays, I just make sure the chassis is clean and tidy, and I paint it with a decent chassis paint. I try not to cover things with really heavy-duty underseals, because you can't see what's going on then. If you put a really sticky chassis paint on, like Rustbuster, they've got an epoxy 1-to-1, I think, chassis paint, which is very good. Sticks like shit to a blanket, it does. But as long as you use it correctly and the surface is prepared, it's good. Would I powder coat another chassis on a restoration? Probably not, because I think I can do it cheap, and obviously this is a business for me now. If I was doing my own car, would I powder coat it? Probably not. I'd probably paint it. I'd probably, go down the painting the chassis route. Whether I galvanised it first or not would depend on the state of the chassis. If a chassis lasted 50 years and hasn't rotted through, it seems a shame to dunk it into a hot galv tank at that point. So I risk warping it. So I'd be inclined actually to clean the chassis, empty the chassis, treat the inside of the chassis, paint the outside of the chassis. I hope that answers your question, Philip. Nothing wrong with powder coating chassis or galvanising chassis, just personal preference. Right, and is with bobtailed motors, do you think it's worth the refurb back to an original standard longer? I see the A suffix A which has been butchered, was thinking of doing a second build. Is it worth it, or is the unobtainium too hard to source? Okay, so I understand what your question is. Would you do a bob? I think it depends on the car. It really does depend on what you've got to start with. If there's enough of that car left after the bobtail, if it's matching numbers still, if it hasn't gone too far down the off-roading route and been battered mercilessly and the chassis bent and twisted, then it's worth doing, I think. It's a lunatic thing to do. That's why I did bob in the first place. It just seemed like I want to entertain myself. Let's do the most unusual thing ever with a bobtail. We'll unbobtail it. I'm not sure it's been done before, has it? Someone let me know down below. Has anyone else unbobtailed a bobtail with its original chassis and axles? Now, Bob, the only thing with Bob Project Bob that really kind of was a shame, is it lost its original engine and gearbox. But that's why I didn't mind putting the 5-speed and the ex-Disco EFI engine back into it, even though the Disco EFI engine went onto carbs. I didn't mind doing that because it wasn't heresy then, because it lost its original power plant. Would I do it again? Yep, absolutely. I would do it again, but with the right car. I think any bobtail motor might be a bit of a problem. And I think in the UK there's a bigger problem in that because of the government of the time cancelling the rolling free road tax scheme, which froze free road tax for any car manufactured prior to the 1st of January 1973, an incredible number of A suffix, because that was largely A suffix, very early B suffix, incredible number of A suffix cars suddenly found their IDs on 1980s cars, which were then bobtailed. So all I would suggest is if you're going to unbobtail a bobtail car, make sure it is what it is. And it's not some sort of 1980s thing that's had a different identity put on it. You've got to make sure that when you finish, it's worth the effort. It's good fun though. I quite enjoyed it. Apart from the gearbox mounts, I enjoyed it. Kelly Christie, how much did it sell for? Can't tell you. Way less than you would have thought. It was bought just after I started the series by a customer, and I finished it on a commission basis. I'm not going to go into the semantics of how much that customer paid for it, which is the only reason I wouldn't tell you what it sold for. I was happy. The customer was happy. It was over his original budget, but I think he's happy. I hope he's happy. It's a great car. Fantastic car. And then Jim Gin. It's a fucking cracking name, that, Jim. Would you do another Bob? Oh, yes. Like I said, with the right car. It's got to be the right motor. The wrong motor, the wrong car. It's just going to be a waste of time. But yeah, I'd do another one. Wainwright's, the golden beer. I'm going to give that a thumbs up. Bit burpy to start off with, but that's all right. Right, a couple more questions here. We've got, what have we got here? Jens Hager, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. What do you think about the move towards EVs? I'll come back to that one, because I think that, sorry, I forgot your name already. David Brody's already kind of rattled me with that one. So I will dedicate the rest of this show to what do I think about the move towards EVs. What, in your opinion, was the reason for the demise of the British car industry? A good question. It's not the obvious answer, though. It's not down to the battle between unions and the government. It's not down to socialism, and it's not down to anything along. Though it's because the UK market was able to buy cars that had more features that were better made from elsewhere. And I'm of an age where I remember 99.9% of the cars on the road being British. And it was very unusual to see a foreign car. And if you did see a foreign car, more often than not, it was French. When the French used to make really interesting cars. But then I think the Japanese market came in, and the market was flooded with Datsuns, 120Ys. I mean, I don't know. People were a little bit anti about it at the time, I seem to recall. I mean, going back to the late 70s and the 80s, and I remember when my dad was looking at cars, my dad seriously considered buying a Renault 25. And he ended up with a Mark IV for Cortina Estate. Now, did he make a mistake? Might have been a Renault 21. Did he make a mistake? Probably not. I don't know. At the time, the Ford was what everyone else would have had, and the Renault was a little bit of a kind of, don't know, you know, it's a bit of a curveball, that one. So I think the demise of the British car industry was largely down to the fact that other countries were able to make cars and get them here and sell them at a competitive price, but offer more features and better reliability. Let's face it, British cars of the era were not renowned for their reliability. Shock horror. There was also the ongoing battle between the bloody unions and the bloody government and the bloody workers and the bloody management. You pick out of that what you want. It's outside. You can look at some of the contemporary 1970s videos. There was one about the British Leyland Spake plant in Merseyside. I suppose Merseyside. It would be Merseyside, wouldn't it? And it was about the workers down at the Working Man's Club moaning like hell about the TR7, what a pile of shit it was. So when the workers hadn't bought into the product, how the fuck are they supposed to put it together properly? I like TR7s. Spake 2 plant workers didn't like them. The Stag was also built there, so the Stag body was built in Spake. Speak, you tell me. The Stag body was built there and then shipped down to Canley, where they united it with the mechanicals. Just ludicrous. Ludicrous, expensive, time-consuming, inefficient. All the reasons the British car industry died a miserable and slow death. Yet some of the last cars that were built in the UK were some of the best cars that we've ever developed. So things like the Rover 75. People are all going to say, oh, it's a piece of shit. It's not. It's a cracking car. Pretty much everything that came out of the back end of BMW's ownership of the Rover Group was outstanding. And some of those cars, the development on those cars actually started when it was prior to BMW buying the company over. So there were some good products, but I don't know. There you go. Favourite racing car? Again, we still begin Saga questions. So, favourite racing car? Well, it depends what for. There's two that spring immediately to mind. There's a Mazda 787RB endurance racing car, rotary engined, phenomenal noise, phenomenal. And there's crazy things like trying to think now. I don't know. I think my favourite overall has got to be the Mazda 787RB. If there's a racing car that can go past you and you can hear it when it's still like 4 miles away and it makes the little hair stand up on the back of your neck, then you're going to say, that's pretty damn good. That is a racing car. There's all sorts of other cars. Sorry, I'm banging the bottle. Fuck it, let's have an Abbott. Let me just get this bottle of beer open. I'll turn that over because I want the flat edge under there. This is an Abbott. There we are. There's things like, the BRM V16. Outstanding. 1.5 litres, 16-cylinder engine. When they get up and they're on cam, you just have to listen to the noise. It screams, it howls. Beautiful thing. Absolute work of art. Seeing historic racing, seeing a Mark I Jag, retrospectively named Mark I Jag, so the Jaguar 2.4 or even 3.4 saloons, seeing those with a back wheel off the ground, front wheel off the ground as they're going into a corner, being driven aggressively. Kind of like, I'm too young to remember drivers like Jim Clark or Mike Hawthorne. Both died before I was born, but Jim Clark was, I've read biographies and I've read up about, he was one of the best all-round racing drivers that this country, this union, has ever created, ever gifted to the world. Died far, far too young. So racing cars, yeah, okay. Mazda 787RB, let's cut that one short. Okay. And then I've got some beer and bollocks suggestions from Chris Sherry. Chris, sorry, mate. I'll do it next time, I promise you. Because I'm going to rant about EVs. No, I'm not going to rant about EVs. I'm going to talk about EVs. So, EV. Well, I've thought long and hard about this. I have thought long and hard about this. Because I even considered, I'll still do it if someone's prepared to sponsor the project. If someone's prepared to buy a Range Rover off plan, I will get it prepared and we'll get it converted to electric. I'm not against an EV. I just think that as a solution for climate change And for clean air in cities, I'm not convinced EV is the road. It's not the way forwards. It's almost, is it the Emperor's new clothes? Now, you'll all be shouting at the telly what a fucking heretic and flat earther I am. No, I'm not, actually. I just think I don't believe everything the government tells me. I believe most of it. I believe they had a damn good time at the parties in Downing Street. Hey, Boris, hope you're watching. Good work, mate. All right, turn that around so you can see Abbott. There we are. Green King. Oh, that's better. Now, Wainwright was good, but now I've had the Abbott, it's less fancy. The Abbott's more of a beer. There's less citrus, there's less fucking around with the ale, walking through the Lakeland Fells. I just want a beer. I don't want to walk through the Lakeland Fells. Very nice. Same price, given the choice, Abbott. But I did like it. Right, back to EVs. The way I look at it, obviously we've got a problem. There is an increasing population. Everyone wants a car these days. And when I was a lad, you know, no one had 2 cars in a household. At all. Full stop. End of story. We're talking the early 70s now. You were lucky to have a car in the household, let alone 2 cars. And now households. Okay, I'm guilty. I've got 7 cars. 8 cars. 9 cars. They don't all go, though. And I can only drive one at the time. So, more of the population seems to be on the road driving now. And because of that, there's more pollution as a result. And I can't get clear answers just by doing my very, very, very simple research. But is the pollution that is created by humanity greater than, let's say, one half-decent volcanic eruption? That's the bit I'm trying to find out. And I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I really don't know. I'll tell you one thing I do know is that electric vehicles, when they're created, they don't pollute baby foxes and little bunny rabbits. No, in some ways, the pollution is just the same creating an EV as it might be a petrol-driven vehicle. However, for the life of that EV, the pollution then is deemed to be much, much, much lower. But the electricity comes from renewable sources. Great. Well, hang about a second. Renewable sources aren't really carbon neutral. And again, correct me if I'm wrong here, folks. None of this is scientifically backed up here. But as I understand it, from conversations I've had, a windmill, one of those pretty fucking great things that massacres the bird population, fantastic, but the blades on the windmill are made from a material that cannot be recycled, and they have to be replaced every 6 or 7 years. So it's landfilled. Now, you're talking cradle to grave here. So from the creation of that windmill blade, it needs to take into its carbon footprint a proportion of the plant that was created to build the blade in the first place, and then the materials for the blade and where they came from, and then the blade itself, and then the shipping of the blade to the site, and then the installation of the blade. You can see where I'm going with this. So renewable energy, yeah, it's better than a coal-fired power station, but how much better? And you can't find it out. Let me know, someone, please. So when it comes to, well, let's go for a different scenario. So I take my 40-year-old Range Rover, 30-year-old Range Rover, and I say, right, I'm fed up with polluting the planet with my 30-year-old Range Rover that was built using steel 31 years ago, and aluminium, steel and aluminium, bit of leather, and very, very, very little hard plastic. Majority of a Range Rover Classic is recyclable. So end of life, a Range Rover Classic can... I'm going to put my arse on the line here and basically say that I think more of an old car can be recycled than an EV. I think. It's not a fact. It's not scientifically proven. I don't know. Prove me wrong. I'll be happy to be proven wrong. I'll be happy to look a complete and utter wanker because I've got it all wrong about EV. But as I see it, EVs are created on the other side of the planet using raw materials from around the world, which are shipped on boats that do 1 foot to the fucking gallon of heavy oil, all to end up here for the owners to sit in them with a fucking smug face on themselves saying, I'm green. Are you fuck? There you go. That's it. I've said it now. So, I actually think that when the average life of a motor car is under 10 years, and I am running a 30-year-old car using upcycled and used old stock parts where possible to maintain it, but where I have to buy new parts, I'm buying responsibly and buying parts that are made in the UK and not shipped in from the other side of the planet on a 747 or whatever they're using to ship things in now. I think 747s are still predominantly the cargo aircraft of the time. And I seem to recall when all this debate was going on. No. Come back to that in a second. Oh, I'll say it now. I was when I first got my first Range Rover, I was driving at the King's Road in my green Range Rover, and fucking loved that car. I felt like the bollocks in it. But I was driving at the King's Road, and some character, I'm not gonna lower myself to describe it, a character shouted out from the side of the road, because I had my arm on the window, you know, I was enjoying my day. Shouted out, why do you need such a big car? Now, I don't even know where it come from. Like a flash, it came out of my mouth because I've got a very small willy. I don't even know where that was going. Where was that going, Richard? I'm going to have to wind it back now and find out where I was going with that. But basically, the old car thing, running an old car, has got to be cleaner, cradle to grave. When my Range Rover was built, it was built at Lode Lane. So, if we were to do carbon footprint properly, in my mind, in my opinion, this is my humble opinion. No, I can have a look at beer now. In my opinion, if we were to do it properly, then each vehicle that comes out of a car plant needs to take a fraction of that car plant's running into its creation as part of its carbon footprint. So it costs X amount of carbon footprints to run that plant on a daily basis. Now they can carve that down to, if they're knocking out 1,000 cars a day, so it's 1,000th of the carbon footprints of that plant for the day. But then also, there's an enormous amount of steel and concrete that's gone into that factory to make it, to build it in the first place. And some of these factories, especially in this country, they've been around since before the Second World War. Don't mention the war. And okay, they've been uplifted and they've been modernised and so forth. But there's an enormous amount of energy is used to create a car. And before that, there's an enormous amount of energy that's used to create the steel that's used for the car. An enormous amount of energy is used to heat the environment that the car is built in. And then you've got all of the workers driving to and from the plant. Not in EVs. No, they can't afford them. I can't afford them. There we go. Probably the end of that, really, isn't it? Ranted. So, then, when the car eventually ends up at the dealership, I reckon the carbon footprint of that car, and it's not driven a metre, is way greater than the carbon footprint during the active life of that car. That's what I think. Prove me wrong, please. Please prove me wrong. Because that's just my gut feeling. My gut feeling is that more energy is used to create a car than it will ever kind of cause damage during its lifetime in carbon footprints. And you're all shouting. No, you won't all be shouting. Most of you will be going, fucking hell, Richard, I think you've got it. You've hit it on the nail there. Bloody hellfire. And there'll be a couple of folk out there saying, fucking flat earther. What's it? Oh, shit. Right. Settle down, Richard. No, I'm not even riled about it. But then, so you use your car during its lifetime, and let's say when it's 8 or 9 years old, which is kind of the average life of most vehicles, you say, right, I've had enough of this thing now. I'm going to sell it, and I've got a trade-in on a brand new Itchy Fanny 5000, and they've offered me £2,000 on this thing, on this piece of shit. And I could sell it, but I can't be asked for more, because I'll end up dealing with some moron and time waster. So I just can't be bothered to kind of upcycle this vehicle into a long. So I'm just going to get it scrapped. So the vehicle then goes off to scrap. Now, these older vehicles, fine. I think the majority of an older vehicle, I pull enough Range Rovers apart now to know that when you pull a Range Rover apart, you end up with less than one wheelie bin full of hard plastics. And that's with them not being crunched down. There's a lot of air in there as well. And there's an enormous amount of copper wiring, which I recycle as part of the steel recycle. Try and save anything that's mechanical, and use that moving forwards. So there's an enormous amount that's recyclable. And I think, right, okay, so that's my old car, where I am. So then we look at where the EV sits. Well, it's an idea, and I think it's a really, really, really interesting. I don't think it's the answer. It's a really interesting idea, but it's not the answer. We need something other than fossil fuel, and for possibly, and this is just a hypothesis here, possibly for 1 million years, the oil companies and the motor manufacturers have been putting pressure on the electronic engineers to slow down the development of battery. Because let's face it, we've seen more development in battery technology in the last decade than we've seen in 100 years. Funny that, isn't it? So battery technology is improving, but the raw materials that go into a battery are still difficult to obtain. They come from various parts of the planet. The parts of the planet they generally come from seem to be third world, from what I've seen. And middlemen reap the rewards, and the rich drive the cars. And the third world stays the third world. And this isn't a political rant here, folks, but this is... I don't understand that the materials can be got. Anyway, bollocks to it. So you get your EV at enormous cost, like the windmill vane. Like I told you, remember the windmill vane? Yep. Never quite, gives more energy back than it's cost to create the fucking thing in the first place. And it's chopped a few birds up in the same, in the process. Solar panels are much the same, I believe. A solar panel uses more energy in its creation than it will save before it breaks, needs recycling, whatever. And at that point, you then end up with cross-contamination and it becomes too expensive to recycle. Do they get recycled? I don't know. Tell me, please. I'd love to know. Someone do a Beer and Ballcocks back at me to answer all my questions. I've got lots of questions here. And I've got lots of questions because I'm responsible. I want to save the planet. I want to make the planet suitable for my kids as they grow up, and my grandkids, when they're born, if they're born. If they're born, that sounded a bit harsh. Yeah, when my grandkids come along in a decade's time, I want to make sure the planet is suitable for them. So I'm not irresponsible about this. But I just don't believe the Emperor's new fucking clothes. And I think EV is interesting, and I think the development in battery technology is interesting, and I think it's an option. But to tell me that I'm going to get a tax break for buying an EV, even though it's polluted the planet beyond all recognition, possibly, I can get a massive tax break on that, but I can't get a tax break on a fossil fuel car that's made here in this country. Second hand. Used. Past its 8 years. Average life. So I think, and again, this is down to me, this is my personal thing, because I can't get the answers I need, and because I think we're basically being hoodwinked by the world government, let's say here, by the panel that tells us about carbon footprints, etc., 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 and they all go on a fucking aeroplane to Marbella for their fucking holidays, drinking beer from Poland and drinking this, that and the other, and eating their fucking mango, crushed avocado breakfast bastards. And that, oh, the crushed avocado, that's a great one, that one is. Oh yes, I had crushed avocado for my fucking breakfast this morning. Oh, that comes from the farm next door, doesn't it? No, it comes from South America. Yeah, that's right, third world. Not third world's probably the wrong word. So it comes from a country on the other side of the planet, so you can have crushed avocado for your fucking breakfast, and then you preach at me about driving an old car. Really? This advert's good. I'm enjoying this. Oh, we're down to 10% battery. That gives me an indication now. Time to wrap up, Richard. So, I'll let you get on to the old Empire IPA. I'll let you know next time how the old Empire IPA got. I've been talking too much. So, is EV interesting? Yes, it is interesting. Is EV the answer? I don't think so. But I'm no scientist. And there are scientists out there that be shouting at the telly saying, you fucking flat earther. Shut your mouth. But I don't know, because like I say, I've asked a lot of questions there. You try and find the answers and let me know, please. Anyway, I managed to stop before it got into too much of a rant. Chris Sherry, I was talking to you today, actually. I promise I'll come back to you with your beer and bollocks suggestions, because they are good. There's some good suggestions there, but the EV thing came out first. So, in my humble opinion, I think driving a 30-year-old Range Rover on petrol is cleaner to the planet overall than an EV. That's my statement. Am I a heretic? Am I a flat earther? I don't know. Tell me whatever you want. I mean, I did run it on LPG for 140,000 miles, but I think moving forwards, it'll be a mixture of LPG and petrol. So there. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it wasn't too traumatic. If you're still here now, thanks very much. If you fancy buying me one of these beers, then there's a PayPal me link thing scrolling down here. I do appreciate every single donation that comes into this channel. Thank you, and good night.